if you feel exhausted by people, drained by emotions that aren't yours, and strangely alone even when surrounded, this is not weakness. Many empaths believe their exhaustion is emotional burnout or social fatigue. But according to Jungian psychology, this tiredness often signals something deeper, a psychological awakening where old patterns of self-sacrifice can no longer continue. Empaths do not just feel more, they carry more. According to Carl Jung, some individuals have unusually permeable psychological boundaries. They sense moods, tensions, and unspoken emotions before words ever appear. This sensitivity often develops early. As children, empaths learn to read the room to stay safe. They learn to anticipate needs. They learn to absorb emotional currents rather than resist them. Over time, this becomes identity. You are the one who understands, the one who listens, the one who holds space. But what begins as empathy slowly turns into emotional labor. You process what others avoid. You feel what others repress. You regulate what others cannot. And the psyche pays a price. Jung believed that when energy constantly flows outward, the inner world becomes depleted, not suddenly, but quietly. This is why empath exhaustion feels confusing. You may rest physically, but still feel tired. You may withdraw socially, but still feel overwhelmed, because the fatigue is not physical. It is psychic. At a certain point, the empath's psyche begins to resist. You may feel less patient with emotional demands, less willing to explain yourself, less able to stay present in draining environments. This is not regression. It is awakening. Jung believed that psychological growth begins when the unconscious withdraws energy from roles that no longer serve individuation. For empaths, this often means a collapse of the caretaker identity. You begin to feel isolated, not because you dislike people, but because your psyche is asking for containment. You no longer want to absorb. You no longer want to carry. You no longer want to be the emotional ground for others. This shift creates distance. People may say you've changed, that you're distant, that you're less available. They are right, but what they call distance is actually self-preservation. The empath's isolation is not abandonment. It is boundary formation. What most empaths call burnout is often misunderstood. Burnout suggests exhaustion without meaning, a state that needs rest, recovery, or escape. But what many empaths experience goes beyond fatigue. It carries an existential weight. According to Carl Jung, true exhaustion occurs not when energy is used, but when it is misdirected. When psychic energy is invested in roles that contradict the self, the psyche eventually withdraws support. This is why empath burnout feels different. You may take time off and still feel drained. You may reduce contact and still feel heavy. You may try self-care and still feel disconnected. Because the issue is not rest. It is misalignment. For years, your empathy may have been shaped into a survival strategy. You learn to soothe others to maintain harmony, belonging, or safety. Over time, your identity fused with emotional availability. But awakening begins when the psyche refuses to continue this contract. The unconscious begins to say, this no longer reflects who you are becoming. So energy is pulled away, not to punish you, but to force reevaluation. Jung described this phase as a necessary disintegration. The old structure collapses, so a more authentic one can emerge. For empaths, this collapse feels like exhaustion because it dismantles the identity that once gave purpose. You are no longer energized by being needed. You are no longer fulfilled by being understanding. You are no longer sustained by emotional closeness alone. This loss can feel frightening. You may wonder who you are without the role of caretaker. You may fear becoming selfish or cold. But Jung warned that growth always involves the death of a former self-image. This is not burnout in the clinical sense. It is a threshold, a moment where empathy must be reclaimed, not as self-erasure, but as conscious choice. The exhaustion is a signal, not to do less temporarily, but to live differently. When empathy has been overused for too long, something unexpected begins to surface. Not softness, not compassion, but anger. According to Carl Jung, whatever is denied in consciousness eventually appears in the shadow. For many empaths, the shadow is not cruelty. It is suppressed self-protection. You may begin to feel irritated by small things, resentful toward people you once cared for deeply, emotionally numb where you used to feel everything. This can be frightening. Empaths often identify with being kind, understanding, and patient, so when anger appears, it feels wrong, even shameful. But Jung taught that anger is not the enemy of empathy. It is the guardian of boundaries. For years, your anger may have been pushed aside to maintain harmony. You learned that expressing frustration risked rejection, conflict, or loss of connection. So the psyche adapted by silencing it. But silence has a cost. Unexpressed anger does not disappear. It accumulates. It turns inward as exhaustion, depression, or withdrawal. This is why many empaths suddenly feel the urge to retreat from everyone. They stop answering messages. They avoid emotional conversations. They crave solitude, not peace, but distance. This withdrawal is not rejection of others. It is the psyche protecting itself from further depletion. Jung described this stage as shadow confrontation, the moment when disowned qualities demand recognition. For empaths, this often means acknowledging rage, resentment, and the desire to be left alone, not to act them out, but to integrate them. The empath's shadow says, I cannot keep giving without limits. I cannot keep understanding at my own expense. I cannot keep carrying what is not mine. Until this shadow is faced, energy cannot return. This is why awakening often feels darker before it feels lighter. The psyche must reclaim what was lost, including the right to say no. Eventually, something begins to change. Not suddenly, not dramatically, but steadily. As the empath confronts their shadow, the anger, the resentment, the need for distance, energy slowly returns. Not because others change, but because you do. According to Carl Jung, integration occurs when rejected parts of psyche are consciously welcomed back. For empaths, this means reclaiming boundaries without abandoning compassion. You begin to choose when to give. You begin to sense when to step back. You begin to feel empathy without self-erasure. This is a turning point. You no longer absorb emotions automatically. You no longer feel responsible for fixing others. You no longer confuse love with endurance. And as a result, the exhaustion lifts. Not all at once, but enough to breathe again. You may notice that fewer people demand your energy, that some relationships fall away, that solitude feels restorative instead of empty. This is not loss. It is recalibration. Jung believed that true compassion can only exist alongside self-respect. Without boundaries, empathy becomes sacrifice. With boundaries, it becomes choice. You are still sensitive, still perceptive, still deeply aware. But now, you are also contained. Your energy is no longer scattered outward. It circulates inward, grounding you. You understand something essential. Your tiredness was not weakness. Your isolation was not failure. They were signals. Signals that the old way of being could not continue. Now, empathy no longer costs you your life force. It becomes what was always meant to be, a gift, not a burden. As your empathy becomes contained, something subtle but powerful changes. Others begin to feel your energy differently. Not because you are colder, not because you care less, but because you're no longer open in every direction. According to Jungian psychology, people unconsciously sense availability. When your energy was diffuse, emotionally open and responsive to everything, others felt invited, sometimes without realizing why. Now, that invitation has changed. You are present but not porous, kind but not absorbent, aware but not responsible. This shift is often misinterpreted. Some people may say you feel distant. Others may say you are hard to read. A few may feel unsettled around you without knowing why. What they are sensing is containment. Jung believed that psychic energy gains strength when it is gathered rather than scattered. When your empathy no longer flows outward automatically, it creates a quiet gravity. You are not broadcasting yourself anymore. You are centered. This is why certain people stop leaning on you. Why emotional dumping decreases. Why manipulation loses its grip. Not because you confront anyone, but because there is nothing to attach to. Your energy no longer leaks. And what does not leak cannot be drained. When your energy stabilizes, not everyone stays. This can be confusing at first. You are not being unkind. You are not withdrawing aggressively. You are simply no longer available in the same way. According to Carl Jung, relationships often form around unconscious needs. When those needs are no longer met, the bond weakens. Some people were drawn to your openness, others to your listening, others to your willingness to carry emotional weight. When that changes, the dynamic shifts. They may pull away quietly. They may engage less. They may seem unsure how to relate to you now. This is not rejection. It is adjustment, sometimes unsuccessful. Jung believed that individuation naturally reorganizes relationships. As you become more whole, fewer people feel comfortable around you, but those who remain relate to you more honestly. You may notice that conversations become simpler, less emotionally charged, more real, or that some connections end without conflict. This is not a failure of empathy. It is its maturation. You are no longer connected through need. You are connected through presence. And not everyone knows how to meet you there. As your energy becomes contained and your boundaries settle, a new state begins to emerge. Calm confidence. Not confidence that announces itself. Not confidence that seeks validation, but a quiet certainty rooted in self-trust. According to Jungian psychology, this phase appears when the empath no longer defines themselves through reaction. You are no longer measuring yourself through others' emotions, expectations, or needs. You begin to move more slowly, speak more deliberately, listen without absorbing. Your nervous system relaxes. You no longer feel the need to fix discomfort in the room. You allow silence without tension. You allow others to carry their own feelings. This changes how people respond to you. Some feel steadied by your presence. Others feel exposed by it. Because calm confidence removes emotional noise. It reflects reality back without distortion. Jung believed that when a person integrates sensitivity with boundaries, they embody what he called inner authority. This authority is not power over others. It is alignment within oneself. You are still empathetic, still perceptive, still deeply human. But now, empathy flows through choice, not compulsion. This is when exhaustion gives way to groundedness, and groundedness becomes strength. Eventually, you stop trying to return to who you were. You understand now that the exhaustion, the isolation, and the withdrawal were not signs of failure. They were signs of transition. According to Jungian psychology, true awakening is not about becoming more. It is about becoming whole. You no longer measure your worth by how much you give. You no longer confuse empathy with self-sacrifice. You no longer fear losing connection by honoring yourself. You have learned something essential. Your sensitivity is not a burden. Your tiredness was not weakness. Your isolation was not abandonment. They were messages. Messages telling you that the old way of relating to the world could not continue. Now, empathy lives alongside boundaries. Compassion lives alongside self-respect. Connection lives alongside choice. You feel quieter, but clearer. Less driven, but more aligned. And for the first time in a long while, your energy feels like it belongs to you. This is not the end of your journey. It is the beginning of living it consciously. Thank you for listening. Until next time, take care of what is truly yours.